this Unicourse video. My name is Ashley and the topic of today's session is recruitment and selection. So the main aim of this session today is for us to delve into human resource management as a function and look at the processes of recruitment and selection within. So this session is loosely based around Unit 514, but there are a couple of different units within the ILM Level 3 and Level 5 programs that, look at the subject of recruitment and selection, so it may help with them as well. So, human resource management is a strategic approach to managing people and the workplace culture and environment. So, done well, employees can contribute effectively and productively to the overall company direction and the accomplishment of the organisational goals and objectives as well. So, what I want you to focus on when completing this unit or any unit surrounding human resource management is the importance of human resource management um, in the culture of the organisation. So this unit specifically, and when you are starting on a unit, it's important to look at the unit specification first. Look at the learning outcomes. So this is split in two. Look at the questions. So you've got 6 questions. Also look at the back page for some hints and tips on how to answer them questions in the indicative content. But bear in mind that the information packs have been designed with the indicative content in mind as well. So yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to generalize, but look into the 6 questions and these two learning outcomes within, because it does cover the recruitment and selection process. Okay, so we'll start off with a couple of definitions. So when we think about what the role of human resource management is, it is a strategic approach to not only managing the people but managing the workforce and the environment. Um, of the organization as a whole. And then, when you look at the relevance, or you could think of the purpose of human resource is to work alongside the management and the staff to try and ensure a peaceful workplace with like a positive culture or working environment as well. Well, when you think about the responsibilities and the relevance, it covers these key areas here. So, when you think about, the recruitment, it's about, obtaining people and it involves activities such as, you know, human resource planning to decide on the future needs of the organization, job analysis to identify and define the parameters of the job roles, the recruitment specifically, which is to attract, applicants for that vacancy, selection to decide and appoint the most appropriate person, induction and orientation to let the new the new employees familiarize themselves with the organization, and then the the other responsibilities include sustaining the employees. So that's by, employee motivation and engagement and how they can go about doing that, ensuring appropriate levels of rewards, compensations and benefits, developing employees that could include provision of training and development and different methods to do that, performance management and appraisal, um, support and communication, and for preparation and opportunity for career development as well. So, recruitment is required for organisational sustainability, growth, diversification, development, or where organisations seek to replace leavers, or people that are getting made redundant. And it's the internal activity undertaken to attract a pool of suitable applicants for vacancies. Sourcing candidates is, one of the first steps in recruitment and selection. So, bear that in mind. But selection is the process of um, shortlisting and selecting the most competent individual. So, although recruitment and selection are two separate processes, you know, con- considerations in one process could ultimately shape the activity in another. So that's really important to bear in mind when you're thinking about the two separate. So let's, and it's also important to think about the different recruitment, methods. So if you are going to be and I want you to bear that in mind throughout the rest of this session today, if you're going to be recruiting internally or externally, think about that and, think about the different approaches to selection as well and how they're done in your workplace. And then think as we're talking about different approaches, could they be done better? Could they be done differently? And if so, how and why? So, forecasting demand for HR, what does that mean? What's it about? Some people may have heard of it before, some people may not have. It's that there are different sections of forecasting for HR. So, demand for HR will be driven by demand for your products or your services. There might even be a demand because you've got new ways of working. You know, Consider COVID, for example. A lot of restaurants didn't even deliver before COVID. And then obviously with lockdown, were they going to shut down or were they going to turn into delivering their their food? So what did they have to do? Maybe they had to recruit drivers, or maybe they used the chefs that were drivers, or maybe they had to, you know, just completely change their ways of working. So a lot of organizations, due to, you know, influences that are out of their control, may have to change. And because of that, they might have to um, ensure that they've got the right supply of suitable people um, to actually meet the demands of the organization at that time. So then you can think of things like, trend analysis. So predictions for HR needs, they could be reviewed based on historical data. It might be, for example, that every Christmas you need more staff. It might be that every Valentine's Day you need more staff, or every Mother's Day you've got an event, or, you know, so think about how you could review trends to analyze the needs. It might even be external trends in industry as well. If you know that one specific product is going really, really big, you might need to um employ some staff for that. It might be that, you know, there's a new software or new technological advancements that that you're gonna have to employ a new person for to keep competitive within the market, then that might need to happen as well. When you look at ratio analysis, it uses links between business factors to forecast future HR needs. So, for example, taking a business factor to be sales, the ratio of sales to salespeople might be um, 250 to 1, for example. Therefore, the number of sales personnel required to meet the sales target can actually be calculated. This is done a lot in nurseries as well. So it's Ofsted requirements that I think it's 1 to 2 babies from a certain age, and then it's like 1 to 6 or 8 with like the preschool room. So you could maybe work it out in that way. So you know that you're going to need more staff if you know if you're going to have more, if you're going to have more service users. Managerial judgment relies on managers with deep insights into the industry and its market, so they can apply their experience and their judgments and their justified opinion really on whether there is a need. So the aim is to achieve consensus on what HR requirements are likely to be considered. So again, such as new technology, the business growth plans, market demand, etc. Then, forecast and supply for HR. Again, when the requirement for HR has been established and a demand has been made, an organization can forecast the number of personnel it will need for the specific roles. So some expected vacancies may be filled from within, and the calculation needs to be made based on previous trends as to how many staff are likely to stay in their current post. So it's a little bit like succession planning. So um, it's about filling gaps, really. So succession planning enables an organisation to identify whether or not it has the appropriate skilled, qualified, and experienced people in place to fill key positions as they arise, such as when people leave or retire. And you can think of this as well in relation to ratio analysis, because if you've got, you know, 50 more people that are employed, might you need more management, more team, to more managers within your organization to manage them teams. So for large organizations, succession planning can be undertaken using human resource management systems as well. And that takes into account ratio analysis. So consider all of these ways that you can forecast demand for for staff and for human resources and human resource planning as well. So let's have a little look into processes here. So, processes for recruitment and selection, because, you know, consider the people, consider um, obtaining people, and what is in, what's that about, what's included in it. And we've spoke um, a little bit about human resource planning. It's being ahead of the game really, but human resource planning, it's essential to maintain and improve delivery standards and meet expected demands by having the right number of people with the right skills in the right place at the right time to meet the objectives and goals in order to make your organization flow well and be successful. So, part of the planning process addresses the recruitment and retention of personnel. However, equally important is the development of training of them personnel to meet the organisational requirements brought about by both the internal um, imperatives and those arising from changes in the organisational environment. So for HR planning to be um, effective, to be efficient, it's necessary to have a well-defined and clear organisational business or a business strategy of some sort. So setting out what it is the organisation is seeking to achieve, having clear strategic goals that will enable the HR departments to outline their requirements and maybe plan for, maybe, like if they need to put a proposal in for new staff, for example. So let me give you an example. If you was to have a 3-year plan and your new vision for the organisation was to international, enter into interna- enter into international markets, you might find that you've got a 1-year plan to do that, a 2-year plan to do that. But by the time that you get to the 3rd year of that plan, you want it to be a success. But you might find by the 2nd year that you need more staff. You need to maybe open up a base in um in certain areas over around Europe or something like that, or and to do that you may need new staff in that area. So, having a clear strategy, outlining the vision, the goals, the objectives, where you want to be, and then thinking about, well, what do I need? What resources do I need at each step of this of this strategic plan? You might then outline in a work breakdown structure, for example, that you need this member of staff or that member of staff. It might not even mean that you need full full-time employed staff. It might mean that you need subcontractors at some point. It might mean that you need temporary staff. It might mean that you need to outsource specialists in that area at that time. The HR planning is about them understanding um, the HR working with the senior management team in order for all of this to run smoothly. So the organisation and its departments need to be appropriately staffed. Costs also need to be controlled. So there's no point in employing someone full time to do a job where the task maybe might only need to be completed in the project for 6 months for it to then stick and work well. Effective, you need the effective deployment of relevant skills need to be considered. Um, you know, there's a lot to be focused on in human resource planning. For me, the main thing is understanding how to analyze the job. So, can the job, if the strategy is being formulated, can that job be completed by someone in house? Should be your first question. If there's no one with them skills, knowledge, or behavior to actually um, to do that, can they be trained to do that? Would the cost of training that person be less than externally hiring somebody? These are questions in human resource planning that need to be asked. And then, you know, when we are thinking, going back to this of recruiting, and selecting, it's important to think about when you are recruiting people as well as to how you're going to do it. You're going to do it internally, externally. In most organizations, they will offer it internally before offering it externally. And if you are offering it internally, are you giving people, are you being equal on that and everybody get involved in the application process? Is the application the same internally as externally? And these things need to be thought about. And then, you're going to be then looking at selecting the right person for that job and how you're going to do that. And then the induction and orientation process is extremely important to, because if you've spent absolutely ages thinking about how you're going to advertise the job, how you're going to how you're going to put the job description, job specification, everything together, how you then going to go about selecting the right candidates, how you're going to go about interviewing that person. You want to make sure that once you've done all of the legwork, that once you pick that person, that they want to stay. I've seen a couple of times in past organisations that I've worked with and that I've actually worked in, and without a really good orientation and induction process, some people might go, "This just isn't for me," and they'll walk away from the job, and that's not what you want after that hard work. And then once you have got that person in place, are there any gaps in their knowledge? It might even just be that they need some help with the software systems, in order to get them up to scratch with what they need to do. So identify them gaps early, try and fill them gaps as quickly as you possibly can in order to get that person feeling comfortable within that role. And then you can think about what personal development that they want to work on and 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 work on that a little bit more in the future. So going back to recruitment and job advertisement, think about what the differences will be. What the advantages will be to internal recruitment and the disadvantages. Same for external. They say, and I think I've got some stats on one of the last slides from a recent CPD survey, but they say that to hire a leader or a manager um, at a higher level, it can cost around £3,000, and it could even probably cost more than that. Because consider um, how much does it cost? How much? Consider the person who's creating the job description, personal specification, and putting it all together and thinking about how they're going to advertise it. Um, that time in itself away from their normal job role, that costs money, costs the organisation money. Time is money. And then how long it's going to be getting advertised for, whether you're going to be using a paid advertising platform or a free one, might just be using LinkedIn or social media, or is it going to be cheaper to um, recruit internally or externally? It's important to think of, well, you already know the people that you're going to be hiring internally. So if you know that they are um, people that are highly motivated, you know, through, it intrinsically through promotion, should you be giving them people a chance more than hiring outside? So, or if you hire them from outside, will they have a completely fresh perspective on the organisation, which you may need to get out of a bit of a rut? So there's absolutely loads to consider. Um, when you are recruiting, but it's important to think about what the advantages and disadvantages are for both, and think about if you are going to be advertising, are you going to be advertising differently? So think about all of these things when you are looking at recruitment. Retaining staff is also really important. As I said about, just the induction and orientation. If you've got good staff, or if you took a long time in recruiting a member of staff, it's important to be able to consider how you can keep hold of that staff, keep hold of them staff. You don't want them going to a competitor because they've got better benefits. You don't want them going to a competitor because that competitor offers more flexibility, so they've got a better work-life balance. You don't want them going to another person in industry because they pay more than you do. So having a little look and checking out the market to see what the rates are is good practice as well. If they're not getting given opportunities for developments and um, investment in them and their career development, then maybe they might go somewhere else that's given them that opportunity to grow. So there's a lot of things to consider, and there's loads of different ones out there. You might even have um, ways of retaining staff, such as every year they get a bonus. It might be that they have um, paid days where they go out and have team building exercises to promote a positive organisational culture. I mean, for me, I know that there are organisations out there that everybody would like to work for. You know, we know that Google are renowned for having a really, really um, amazing, amazing way of working that attracts a large candidate pool when they open up a you know for any role really. And very is another one. That there's a lot out there. So think about reputation, your brand to the potential candidates as well. So next, we're going to look at best practice and recruitment and selection. So consider, being fair, being, making sure that policies and procedures are written in accordance to legislation as well. You know, the purpose of a recruitment policy, or it can be defined. I've given a definition of a policy and a procedure, but the way I think about it is a policy sort of sets the standards and gives guiding principles, whereby a procedure provides a framework for ensuring that you're staying within them standards and them principles. And that the standards, principles, or codes of conduct, whatever you want to call them, link in with the legislation or the regulations. But the purpose of a recruitment policy is to ensure that there's a professional and consistent approach to recruitment and selection, and that it adheres with the Equality and Diversity, and the Equality Act, for example, the Employment Rights Act, that members of staff are recruited on the basis of their abilities, and nothing else really, and that they're fit for the role. And managers should be aware that all of the policies all of the policies that link in with recruitment and selection in order to stay fair and consistent as well. So there is, there is a great, a great, there's a great point in looking at the policies and procedures if you are quite rusty with recruitment and selection. It is quite important to be aware of which ones that that link with recruitment and selection, and it's also important that when you're inducting staff, that you're making them fully aware of the legislation and the policies that are part of the organisation relating to any human resource management. Okay, so next, we're going to look at the stages of recruitment. So, it can sort of be broken down into the different sections: defining the role, attracting the applicants, managing the application and selection process, and then making the appointment. So, making the appointment, provided the contract, But when you're looking at the job role, that's also broken down. So, I've seen in the past people just copy and pasting from other competitors a job description for um for a calls handler, for example, and I'm like, haven't you got anything specific to your organisation? It's important to really analyse what's needed for the job in order to provide the job's purpose and the duties involved, how and where it could be carried out, what outputs would be expected by the job holder, and how it fits with the organisational structure as well. And the job description goes into a little bit more detail of that. So the job description provides an overview of the role, including the responsibilities and the objectives. And it can also provide clarity during the induction and even later on performance and objectives. I've seen people before use the job description to then set the standards for their performance management process. So an example would be, um, they've used, like, say there was like 10 bullet points in the job description, they've used that as part of the one-to-one performance review. And they've said, how do you rate yourself on 1 to 10? The person rated them on 1 to 10, and then the manager has rated them 1 to 10, and then they had an open discussion if the score was different as to what could be improved. So it's good to really think about what you're going to be putting in the job description. The job specification, it appears, oh, sorry, the personal specification, it states the criteria for selection. Sometimes there's essential or desired um, criteria in there. Make the role requirements clear, specific, and behaviour based here as well. So it's not always necessary. Quite a lot of interpersonal skills and stuff can be included in this as well. But competency and competency frameworks are sometimes substituted for a job or a personal specification as well. So bear that in mind, that it can be slightly different there. And then the job advertisement. So this should be, it should be clear, it should be accurate information about the organisation and the job. And there's been loads of research and conflicting reports really on whether they say that the salary should be included there, because it could differ on the person's experience when they come in. So it depends on what your organisation's usual practice is. Do you provide a salary in the job advertisement, or do you say to be confirmed depending on experience? But there's lots that you can include in the job advertisement. Sometimes you want to keep it small depending on where you're advertising it. If you're advertising it on LinkedIn, you might keep it shorter. If you're advertising it with a recruitment agency, it might be longer. If you are advertising internally, how would that differ to externally? Because maybe the people internally already know that the benefits, the rewards and benefits, and the flexible working, and so consider all of these things when you are defining the role. Okay, so let's look now a little bit more on selection. Okay, so how do we go about selecting the candidates? It can be a really, really, really big job. If you recruit using recruitment agencies, it can be a little bit easier. Obviously, if you're using headhunters, you might get given people based on their experience. There are many different ways of selecting people. It might be that you get the CVs and then you narrow them down based on one or two specific criteria in the job description or the personal specification. It might be that an organization actually does that for you. It might be that you have application forms, and if something is missing of that application form, they might not come through and be selected. It might be that you have maybe a Teams interview, and that helps you to see whether you can narrow that down. It might be that they have to do a psychometric test as part of that selection process. So it might be that they need to do a presentation if they're in management role or a marketing role that they need to be presenting. Um, so there's many different selection methods. So bear all of them in mind when you are deciding on how you are going to be recruiting and selecting candidates. Look at the positives, the negatives. Maybe look at industry standards as well and the level in which they're going to be working. This will this will also help you to shortlist those with the right skills for your organisation as well. So it's important to really think. I mean, I know people that they've had over the phone call, then they've done a presentation in front of three people, then they've went to an interview panel, and then following on from that, they've done a psychometric test. If it's a big role, you really, really do want to be stringent on it, especially if you've got absolutely loads of candidates coming through. What can you do to get that down? I've provided some stats in here because, but I've also provided this resource, the full report on Moodle for all of the recruitment and selection associated units as well. But there's really good stats on this, and it only come out in April 2022. So recruiting senior managers cost an average of £3,000, and that's about the same from last year. But recruiting other employees has gone up. Um, it's now £1,500. It was 1,000 in 2021. Competition for well qualified talent increased over the last year by 70%. So that's why it's really important when you're advertising to try and stand out from the crowd. 77% of experienced difficulties attracting candidates, and that's up 49% from the year before. So, you know, benefits, and maybe they do need to be on the adverts, the benefits, the pay, what you can offer that maybe other organizations and industry can't. If you know that all your competitors are looking for staff as well, and you are as well, what can you do to stand out from the crowd, to build your reputation, to be someone that candidates want to apply for first? That might even be that you offer them flexible working hours, that you offer them a company car, um, that that you offer them a scheme for a bike to work, for example. It might be that you have a gym in your workplace. So there's many of ways that you can stand out from the crowd. So let's look at shortlisting now. Now we've looked at selecting and looked at maybe some ways of narrowing it down, but shortlisting can be really difficult, especially if you haven't got a process. Because if you haven't got a process for shortlisting, it might end up being bias from department to department. And one thing you need to be in recruitment and selection, one thing that you need to be is fair and consistent in the recruitment and selection process. So think about the application forms. Think about how coherent they are across all departments. Obviously, if it needs to be different at the different levels, that's fine. If it needs to be different questions for different departments, that's fine. But try and be as consistent as you can in relation to application forms and how you narrow down the CVs. Measuring against the personal specification is obviously really important. If you've got desired and essential, um, and somebody meets all of the essential criteria and only some of the desired, how are you going to weigh that up against maybe the application form if some parts are covered but some aren't? So a process will only make it easier for the people that are deciding. And then once you've measured up, think about maybe there might be some way, some multiple choice questions that you can have just to narrow down. So one of them that's common is, do you drive? um um and like say it, or something that is needed for that role, that's training might not be necessary. If you've got two people that are shortlisting, you can compare and contrast as well. But maybe if you have three, you'd have an overarching person just to decide on that. And then, make sure that your approaches are always inclusive and comply with the Equality Act as well. And make sure that you record the process that you've got for future records to make it easier for the next person to go ahead and recruit as well. So managing the application process, it's important to consider all of these things. So the application forms, how you're going to narrow down the CVs, are you going to use places like LinkedIn or agencies, industry agencies? How are you going to go about sending emails out or phone calls to to the people that are going to be providing references? At what point will you need them? Managing the applicants as well, who's going to be getting them all together and managing them to tell you whether they've sent the CVs or just done the application forms. Is there a checklist for that? Is there a time frame for selecting the applicants? Are there any sort of psychometric tests or medical questionnaires in order for you to know whether you need to make any sort of reasonable adjustments for the interviews or the selection process? And remember that when you do make the appointment, the employment offer doesn't always need to be set in stone. It can be negotiated as well. So consider all of these things when managing the application and selection process. So recruitment and selection isn't as easy as everyone may seem. And if you are quite new to it, there are a range of resources on Moodle, on the Institute of Leadership and Management's toolkit, also on CIPD and gov.uk. So you can have a little look for a bit more on that. Be sure for this unit to look at the indicative content, as learning outcome 2 gives you quite a lot of tips on what to include to get the full marks and to get a good pass. But for me today, that is the end of our session. If you have any questions relating to this topic, because I know that there is a lot to it, please email me. Or, if you look at the indicative content and you see a specific topic that maybe I haven't fully covered, then have a look in the resources section on the CIPD um, website or on gov.uk, as you might be able to find a little bit more information on that. Thanks for watching this video today, and I'll hopefully catch you soon. Goodbye.